Is it true that President Zelensky is coming on Friday to meet with you, and is the mineral deal sorted out?
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that he's coming on Friday. Certainly, it's okay with me if he'd like to, and he would like to sign it together with me, and I understand that's a big deal, very big deal. And I think the American people, even if you look at polling, they're very happy because, you know, Biden was throwing money around like it's cotton candy. And it's a very big deal. Look, it could be $1 trillion deal. It could be whatever, but it's rare earths and other things. And look, we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on Ukraine and Russia fighting a war that should have never, ever happened. That's a war that would have never happened if I were president. And it didn't happen for 4 years. People say, how do we know that? It didn't happen for 4 years. Would have never happened. And nevertheless, this guy went into this situation and he spent money like nobody's ever seen. $350 billion. The other thing that we don't like is that Europe has spent $100 billion. We've spent $350 billion. Europe gets their money back because they spent it in the form of a loan, and we just gave them, whether it's 300 or 350 billion, nobody really knows. They can't even tell me the answer to that. But it means probably more than that. So what we're doing is now we're saying, look, we want to be secured. We want to get that money back. We're helping a country through a very, very big problem, a problem like very few people have had. Shouldn't have had this problem because it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen, so we have to straighten it out. But the American taxpayer now is going to get their money back plus.
Mr. President, yesterday with Emmanuel Macron, you said you had spoken to Putin about the idea of peacekeepers in Ukraine, that Putin was fine with it. The Kremlin, I guess, has said that that's actually unacceptable to them. What's real here? That's
not what I was told. But you're going to need some form of peacekeeping, so something will be done that's going to be satisfactory to everybody. We need peacekeeping too.
Any situation where there are American troops involved?
It's actually something I did discuss, but a form of peacekeeping that's acceptable to everybody. Ultimately, we'll be able to agree on something, I'm sure.
With Ukraine and this mineral deal, what does Ukraine get in return, Mr. President?
$350 billion and lots of equipment and military equipment and the right to fight on and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say, they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time. In fact, I was the one that gave the javelins. You remember the famous javelins? That was me. That wasn't Obama. It wasn't Biden. It wasn't anybody else. It was me. And they wiped out a lot of tanks with those javelins. And the expression was that Obama gave sheets and I gave the javelins. That was a big deal at the time. It wiped out. That was the beginning when people said, wow, that's something. Well, that was American equipment. Without American equipment, this war would have been over very quickly. And American money, too. I mean, a lot of money.
So when you, Mr. President, that war-fighting equipment and the ammunition, that's sustained going forward for Ukraine, and how long is it sustained?
Well, it could go forward for a while, and maybe until we have a deal with Russia. Look, we need to have a deal with Russia, otherwise it's going to continue. But now when Americans put up their money, the taxpayer money, and the president approves it, we're getting our money back in some form. But it could go on for a while, or it could be settled quickly. I think it's going to be settled quickly. I spoke with President Putin. I think he wants to settle it. And once you get on with life, it's horrible. What's happening horrible. Thousands of soldiers a week are being killed. And others too, but especially on the battlefield. Thousands a week are being killed. And we want that to end.
Mr. President, on Ukraine, would you provide military support for Ukraine in the future under a peace agreement?
Say it again louder.
Would you provide military support for Ukraine in the future as part of
You mean like security?
Yeah.
Well, people are going to do it. I think Europe will largely be responsible for that.
But
European countries will be responsible.
But Macron asked for a U.S. backup.
Well, we'll see. I mean, right now we're just in the process of negotiating. We've pretty much negotiated our deal on raw earth and various other things. We'll be looking at that security. You're talking about general security for Ukraine later on. I don't think that's going to be a problem. There are a lot of people that want to do it. And I spoke with Russia about it. They didn't seem to have a problem with it. So I think they understand. They're not going back in. Once we do this, they're not going back in.
So on that cold card, aircraft.
On that cold card, 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 on that cold card
Would the U.S. provide, for instance, air defense?
Well, I just told you, right now we're not providing anything. You know, it's about Europe, too. Europe put in $100 billion and we put in $350 billion. It's not a fair thing. You know, we would normally say, and I say it now anyway, but we want equalization. They should put up actually more money than us because they're right there. We have an ocean in between. But we've had very good talks with Russia. We've had very good talks with Ukraine, and we think it maybe will come to an end and we'll stop killing young people all over the battlefield and elsewhere.
On Europe, so do you plan to maintain having military presence in Europe in the long term, like tens of thousands of troops?
We'll be involved. Yeah, we'll be involved in Europe. We're involved in Europe now. Europe is our friend, and they take advantage of us on trade. We don't like that. What the EU does, we don't like that. But we'll solve that the old-fashioned way. We'll give them the same reciprocal numbers. You know, we're talking about a reciprocal tax, you know that. And if they charge us, we charge them. Right now, they charge us much, much more than we charge them. And they have non-monetary taxes also and tariffs. And we're going to change that. It's all changing. It's all changing. We're not going to be the people that we were. We had people in this office sitting right at this desk or another model of this desk, because as you know, the other desk is right now being refurbished.
What's going to be more challenging, a PGA Live deal or a Russia-Ukraine deal?
I think the PGA deal is much more complicated.
Sir, may I ask the Middle East question, if I may? What's your take on what's happening in the West Bank and what Israel?
Well, it's some movement up there that a lot of people are concerned about. And there's been a lot of Israeli movement. They're up there for a reason. All of a sudden, maybe they're not feeling so good about that. So that would be terrible. I hope that doesn't happen. But there is movement up there that nobody knew about. Right? You know that, right?
Yeah, and when you say, are you concerned about it as well?
I'm concerned about everything. I want the world to be peaceful. You know, when I left here, we had no war. We had defeated ISIS in less than 4 weeks. In fact, I took the general that defeated ISIS and I put him in charge of the whole ball game, because that's what we want. We want winners. Raisin Cane, you know, Raisin. When I heard that name, I said, I like that name. That's the kind of general I like. So we'll see. But he was great. He's a great soldier. Not a politician, a soldier, a real soldier. You know that, Brian. This guy was the real. This guy's the
story a million times.
Yeah, this guy's the real deal.
He is.
And I think he's going to do a great job. But think of it. We had no wars. We had no problems. We had no inflation. We had no problems. And then all of a sudden you have October 7th in Israel, which was horrible. And then you see what happened with Ukraine. Russia would have never gone in if the election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. The 2020 election was rigged. And we got out of it. And you see what happened. You see what happened to our country. Inflation, Afghanistan, that horrible withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think when Russia saw what happened in Afghanistan, they said, wow, it's a paper tiger. We're not a paper tiger. We are the strongest military force in the world. And by the way, Pete Hegseth is doing a great job. But we didn't have wars. We didn't have inflation. We had a strong border. We had everything going good. And then Biden got in, and he's, in my opinion, the worst president in the history of our country. I think Jimmy Carter was a very happy man when he passed away 2 weeks ago.